I'm joined now by someone who needs no introduction, Congressman Jamie Raskin. Thanks so much for joining me again.
Well, I certainly need no introduction for your audience because you have me on all the time, Brian.
That's
It's
right.
always my pleasure. It's always a delight to be with you. So happy holidays.
You too, Congressman. So from your vantage, how do you think Republicans feel about President Musk being given full control now over their party?
Well, some of them love it. I think the most mega inflected of them love it. Um, and the others just kind of are borne along by whatever happens. They've
Right.
made their peace long ago with Trump being the dictator ruler of the GOP. And there might be a handful of them who are alarmed by the further degradation of politics on their side.
Is there any sense of regret, at least from your Republican colleagues, maybe folks who you've spoken to, that they did usher in a billionaire who is now immediately threatening to fund primary opponents if they don't fully bend the knee? Or to your earlier point, are they just that content to fall in line and kiss the ring?
I mean, I think they're coming to the conclusion that they have created a monster in Donald Trump who's just uncontrollable and incorrigible and ungovernable, and he just does whatever he wants. And that includes bringing in people just like him. I mean, it's going to be a cabinet of billionaire oligarchs. It will look a lot like Putin and his oligarchs. So we're talking about people who own significant segments of the American economy, and then because of that are granted a place at the table to govern. That there's a name for that, which is oligarchy or plutocracy, rule of the wealthy. Although that makes it sound too diffuse and widespread. It's really oligarchy. It's the rule of the wealthiest people, a handful of them, over everybody else. We're talking about a country of hundreds of millions of people, which is built on the struggle for and the principle of one person, one vote.
Well, Elon's first big move was to demand that the CR, the continuing resolution, be slimmed down. Republicans did that by stripping out certain provisions, like a bunch of healthcare provisions, including childhood cancer research funding. Elon then supported that new bill. So is this what we can expect from the new head of the Republican Party? Is this the populism that was promised and that voters voted for?
Well, I don't think, certainly that was not put on the table specifically as subject matter. Like, let's remove research for pediatric cancer. Let's attack VA benefits. No, that wasn't. And I think the optics of it were striking to people that, you had the wealthiest person in the world demanding the deletion of these programs to benefit poor people and kids and working people. So we'll see how long that lasts, and
Yeah.
how long the pseudo populist pose will be convincing to people.
So, in the aftermath of these programs being deleted from the initial CR, there was a lot of talk on the right about, okay, well, this, the Gabriella Miller Kids First Act 2.0 had already passed the House back in March, and it was sitting languishing in the Senate. So, can you explain why the Senate couldn't simply pass the bill to fund pediatric cancer research, since it did pass out of the House previously?
Well, for the same reason it's difficult to pass almost anything out of the Senate, which is the filibuster. And the filibuster means that you need not 51 votes to get something through, but 60 votes. And the way that's operationalized is that each member can place a so-called hold on a bill, on any legislation going through their hotline process. And if one senator says no, they can stop it. So the way that you get legislation through is as part of a package and a compromise where lots of different things are put together, and you don't love X and I don't love Y and Z people are okay with, and you put it all together and then it goes through. And that's the kind of negotiation that works over there. But it would have been extremely difficult, if not impossible, to say, well, let's just take it out and have the Senate pass it, because anybody, Rand Paul or
Right.
Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz could have just blocked it.
And by the way, we did see Rand Paul block this bill, and it wasn't until Tim Kaine got him to finally release his hold that this was able to pass with unanimous support. But that doesn't mean that it would have passed prior to that, and it also doesn't mean that that a bunch of the other healthcare provisions that we had intended to pass, including provisions that would impose penalties on drug companies for not doing the less lucrative work of pediatric cancer research funding, that none of that got attention either, and a lot of these failed to pass as the result of this. It was like, thankfully, the Gabriella Miller Kids First Act 2.0 was able to pass, but that's owed in large part to the fact that there was so much pressure on it. There isn't that much pressure on the lesser known provisions that failed to pass as the result of Elon's meddling in this broader CR. Trump had said that anybody who voted for a clean CR would be primaried. Cut to 170 Republicans did vote for a clean CR at the end of the day. Does that suggest that perhaps Trump has less political capital than he might think?
Well, I think those threats just get diluted over time in terms of their effectiveness. I mean, they threaten them every day. If you don't do exactly what we want to do, we're going to put up candidates against you. Elon's going to spend millions to stop you. Trump is going to endorse your opponent. And I mean, it's kind of humiliating that you get elected to the United States Congress and, you constantly have this system of legislative extortion mobilized against you. And, why even do it at that point? So I do think that their hold is weakening, especially since they're constantly careening from one side of the road to the other. The continuing resolution that they blew up was the product of many, many weeks of intensive bipartisan negotiation. And then Elon sent out his tweet, and then the politicians started getting scared, and the support was eroding over the course of the day. Then they asked Trump about it, and then Trump had to scramble to catch up with Elon, and it was just chaos. So then they scrambled to put together this hodgepodge bill the next day, which was utterly indigestible to us. And I think all the Democrats voted against it, or maybe one person voted for it. But then a bunch of Republicans voted against it, too. I think 37 Republicans opposed it on that day. And I mean, this very quickly triggered memories of the terrible election of Mike Johnson, which went on for more than a week with all of these different ballots. You'll remember 2:00 in the morning. And we realized we're being plunged back into the exact same kind of chaos that they started the 118th Congress with.
Can you speak on the diffusion of responsibility that Republicans are trying to engage in right now? Right after that second CR failed, where, as you mentioned, 38 Republicans voted against it, Elon took to Twitter and blamed it on Speaker Jeffries because only a few Democrats had given support. But Democrats aren't in the majority. The Republicans are the ones that are in the majority, and it's not necessarily the Democrats' responsibility to bail out the Republicans or to teach them how to govern when, again, they control the House. So can you speak on this attempted diffusion of responsibility by the Republicans right now on the Democrats who are in the minority in the House?
Well, this is a lesson that they just can't seem to learn, or they just have to learn it over and over again. Look, they've got a very slender, tiny majority in the House. They have no majority in the Senate, which means that you've got to negotiate. It's got to be bipartisan. And even in the next Congress, where they've got this slenderest of majorities in the House and a slender majority in the Senate and the White House, theoretically, they could just go ahead and say, we're just going to ram everything through. But if they can't come together in their own conference, then they're going to have to turn to Democrats, which is how we've kept the government open. It's how we've passed a budget repeatedly with the continuing resolutions. But they get dozens of defections from the most magnified Freedom Caucus people. Although now there seems to be a split even there. I'm not sure I can understand all the convoluted politics of it. I know that Trump has been trashing Chip Roy and some of the other Freedom Caucus people. But in any event, they can't get together. So then they come to us. So then we negotiated a continuing resolution, bipartisan compromise. We were all set, and it got blown up. So then they came back and they said they didn't talk to us. So there was no negotiation. They just said, we're just going to put this on the floor. So of course we're not going to vote for it after that job they did on the original bill. It was terrible. And then Elon, who really doesn't understand the process, in fairness to him, said, well, the Democrats didn't support it. Well, of course we wouldn't support it. We weren't part of the dialogue that led to it. So then
Right.
there was legislation that was not what we'd originally agreed to, but we understand the situation they'd been put into and that they have a very difficult time governing. And so we just went with it because we were not prepared to shut down the government. But Mike Johnson has lost all credibility as a negotiating partner. People kept saying, well, wait, who are we negotiating with? Is it Mike Johnson? Is it the Freedom Caucus? Is it Donald Trump? Is it Elon Musk, who's never been elected to anything? Like, who do we negotiate with? And it's just a very crazy way to try to run a railroad.
Well, Congressman, isn't that the exact issue that led to Kevin McCarthy's ouster, because he had lost the ability of the Democrats to actually trust who they were negotiating with, and he lost the trust of his own conference. That sounds an awful lot like what's happening with Mike Johnson right now.
Right. And we're heading right back into January 3rd, where we're all going to be sworn in and a
Right.
speaker's got to be elected. But on January 6th, this time we also have to meet in joint session under the 12th Amendment to receive the Electoral College votes. And either there will be a speaker or there won't be a speaker, but it's never happened before in American history that we have this kind of flux and uncertainty heading into, the January 6th receipt of the Electoral College votes.
So I want to switch gears to some good news here, and that is that you were elevated to the ranking spot on Judiciary, the House Judiciary Committee. Why was it important to upend normal procedure and make a run at sitting atop that committee?
Well, actually, it is the normal procedure that we elect people every 2 years. I mean, what was unusual about it was just that there's a presumption that you go with the most senior person. And I'm not the most senior person. I'm just still in my fourth term in office. So I've been in the House for 8 years, which is not a long time for, some people will be in the House for 30, 40 years, something like that. But look, I just felt that we're in the fight of our lives. And I have devoted my career so far centrally to the defense of democratic political institutions against all of the fraud and the cheating and the violence and so on. And the Judiciary Committee is going to be the front lines of the assault on the Department of Justice, the continuing erosion of ethics in the judiciary, the attack on immigrants, the attack on reproductive rights. And the Oversight Committee, of course, is essential too. But I felt after I was prevailed upon by lots of colleagues on the Judiciary Committee and in other parts of the House to run for it, and it worked out well. And so I will be working hard on the Judiciary Committee as the ranking member, along with the new ranking member on Oversight, who's Jerry Conley from Virginia.
And I want to talk about that. While again, your ascension to the top of Judiciary was beyond welcome news, AOC lost her run to lead Oversight, which would have given one of the most effective communicators in the Democratic Party the ability to have a bigger megaphone. And look, I think that we should be under no delusions about how difficult it is to garner attention in the attention economy. AOC has a singular ability to be able to do that. So can you speak on that decision by the party more broadly?
So this is where the power of seniority really did kick in. AOC is even more junior than me. She came in the term after me, so she's only been in for 3 terms. She's only been in Congress for 6 years, and Jerry Conley's been in Congress for more than 20 years. Alex has been my vice ranking member on Oversight. So she has had a very intensive 2 year tutorial in the management and running of a committee and has worked very closely with a lot of our members and has done a fantastic job at it. But Jerry Conley exceeds her in terms of his experience with dealing with the manifold issues of the Oversight Committee, including the management of all these different government departments. And so I think it was amazing that she came as close as she did, really, because a lot of people were saying, Jerry Connolly is perfectly able to do the job, and he's smart on his feet, and he knows the issues really well. But there's a lot of love for AOC, and as you're saying, she speaks to the outside world and to the country in a way that none of us do. I mean, she's got millions and millions of followers in the social media, and I have colleagues, more senior colleagues, who really don't even understand the social media channels that she's an absolute master of. So that's something that I think the Democrats in the House and in the Senate, the Congress generally, are going to have to deal with. But AOC is not going anywhere but up. I mean, I think I've encouraged her to stay on the Oversight Committee because I think her future is very bright there. And we work together on a whole bunch of different projects in the House and in the country to communicate a very strong, true blue progressive democracy message in the country, including, our Democracy Summer project that we do in the summer. And I work with her and Maxwell Frost and a bunch of the other junior members on. So there is, an important generational dimension to American politics, like all politics. And this is a generation that is really coming of age, and we need them badly right now.
Is there some, I guess, to assuage some concerns, because it does feel like when you have somebody who is a unique talent within the Democratic Party who fails to ascent up to the ranking member role, which would again give her a bigger megaphone, is there an understanding or an acknowledgement within the Democratic Party that there does need to be changes in terms of how the Democrats reach out to people in the broader media ecosystem, the evolving media ecosystem right now, given what happened in November?
It's something that's very much on my mind. I certainly believe it, and I've been making an effort, despite the fact that I was like the big rebel of the season before Alex's run, and I was a 61-year-old grandfather when I, captured that position, but that was seen as scandalous enough. So I think it was just a bridge too far to go with AOC as a ranking member at this point. But look, her legislative skills are fantastic. And as you're saying, her communication skills are really surpassing. And I think people know that, and there will be lots of different ways for that to be expressed and represented. I mean, for example, one of the things I've thought about is they're creating this new DOGE committee, the Department of Governmental Efficiency, although it's not a department in the House, in the Oversight Committee. It's just a legislative subcommittee. Even in the administration, it's not a department. I think they wanted to call it that just so it mirrored the Bitcoin that the Elon's got. But in any event, they're appointing Marjorie Taylor Greene to be the head of that subcommittee. She's going to be the head of it. Well, I mean, one way to put that whole thing away very quickly is to make AOC the ranking member on that and put AOC up against MTG. That will be a top-ranked show, but I think that the intellectual substance and the insight that Alex brings to it will shine through. And that, I think that will be that would be one meaningful demonstration of what we're talking about. But there's lots of opportunities, and we will see that there will be a proliferation of opportunities for Alex, and not just Alex, by the way. I mean, Melanie Stansbury from New Mexico, and Greg Casar from Texas, Maxwell Frost from Florida, Jared Moskowitz from Florida, Dan Goldman from New York. I mean, we've got an extraordinary junior team, and that's not even talking about the freshmen who are coming in right now, like Maggie Goodlander from New Hampshire and Julie Johnson from Texas. I mean, extraordinary people are getting elected because they understand the stakes of the times, and they're running, and we've got to figure out a way to use them in the House, in the Congress, and out in the country, in the Democratic Party. And, but one thing I've noticed, Brian, is that, when when things are going all right, when we're winning elections or we do things well, then people talk about, yeah, we're doing well. And then when something happens that disappoints us, then we say, well, you Democrats better do this and you Democrats better do that. And I wish that people would use the third person singular. Is it that we use the we form to
Yeah.
describe it, because we can make these things happen. And despite the fact that Jerry Connolly won, that's not a disaster or anything. I mean, Jerry Connolly is himself a great an effective legislative leader. He just comes from a different generation, so he doesn't have all of the amazing skills that Alex has in terms of communication through all of the channels that other members are just getting acquainted with now.
Well, you had mentioned, the importance of the Times. To quote somebody who you like quoting quite often, Thomas Paine said the Times have found us. And so I'm glad that in this time right now, we do have you atop judiciary to do the work that you do so well and like nobody else can do. So, Congressman, thanks for taking the time today. Happy holidays, and looking forward to seeing what you do in the new year.
It's always a pleasure. We're going to be fighting hard for strong democracy and freedom and the rule of law in the new year. And we need you. Thank you for everything you do, Brian. And send happy holidays to your family and to all of your great listeners out there.